not mean that your journey is over. While the first step may be over, the journey to maintain the right to live and work in the United States is just now beginning. Or it is very important for you to maintain permanent residence status in the U.S. if you have any desire to become a U.S. citizen. The key point here is that it is necessary for you to continue to permanently reside in the U.S. Otherwise, you run the risk of no longer being considered a permanent resident of the U.S. As a permanent resident, you have adopted the U.S. as your home. This means that you have to respect and be loyal to the United States. You are required to obey the laws of the country. It also means that you gain new rights and responsibilities related to your adopted nation. It should be noted that being a permanent resident is a privilege and not a right. The U.S. government can take away your green card status under certain conditions. This article will discuss how you can maintain green card status and why it is so important to do so. How to maintain green card status. There are certain important things you must do to maintain green card status, especially with a view towards seeking naturalization in the future. The following points must be kept in mind when you prepare to apply for naturalization as a U.S. citizen in the future. Number 1, don't leave the United States for any extended period of time or move to another country with the intent of living there permanently. Always file your federal, state, and if applicable, local income tax returns as a resident. Register with the Selective Service if you are a male between the ages of 18 and 26. Always give your new address to DHS. Let's take a look at a case. Bruce, a national of Great Britain and a permanent resident of the U.S., married his longtime girlfriend a couple of years ago. He filed a relevant petition for her shortly after they got married. Bruce finished his bachelor's degree in engineering at a university in England and got a job at a British manufacturing company after graduation. He has been living primarily in Great Britain for the last 5 years, including his last 2 years of university and 3 years of working. He's only been coming back to the U.S. for a few short weeks every couple of years to renew his re-entry permit. Bruce has paid his U.S. income taxes, but has no residence in the U.S. other than the home of his parents, whom he got his green card through. Bruce is planning a trip to the U.S. next month, and his wife should be scheduled for her immigrant visa interview within the next 3 months. Will Bruce have difficulties in maintaining his permanent resident status when he travels to the U.S. next month? We will answer this question after we continue our discussion. Let's discuss each of the 4 points and how they apply to your future. 1. Keep your immigration status. Do not leave the United States for an extended period of time. Many immigrants believe they can live abroad for as long as they want, as long as they return to the U.S. at least 1 time per year. This is incorrect, though. Long absences indicate that you do not intend to maintain green card status in the U.S. Permanent residents or green card holders who leave the U.S. for extended periods of time or who cannot show their intent to live permanently in the U.S. may be considered to have abandoned their status in the U.S. and they're going to lose their green card status. If you think you will be out of the U.S. for more than 6 months, and definitely if there is any chance you will be outside the U.S. for more than 12 months, you should apply for a re-entry permit before leaving the country. You apply for the re-entry permit on Form I-131. That's the application for a travel document. A re-entry permit is valid for up to 2 years, and it allows you to remain outside the U.S. for the period of 2 years, the period of validity of your travel document. You may show the re-entry permit along with your visa or your green card at any U.S. port of entry on your return. Having a re-entry permit does not guarantee that you will be readmitted to the U.S. when you return, but it can make it easier to show that you are returning from a temporary visit abroad and greatly improve your chances. Number 2, file your tax returns. File your federal, state, and if applicable, local income tax returns. As a permanent resident, you must file income tax returns as a resident and report your income to the Internal Revenue Service. And this is for your state, city, or local tax departments also. If you do not file income tax returns while living outside the U.S. for any length of time, or if you file as a non-immigrant on your federal tax returns, the U.S. government may decide that you have given up your green card status. Number 3, register with the Selective Service. If you're a male and you are between the ages of 18 and 26, you must register with the U.S. Selective Service. When you register, you are telling the U.S. government that you are available to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. The U.S. does not currently have a military draft, which means that permanent residents and citizens do not have to serve in the Armed Forces unless they want to. Give your new address to DHS. Every time you move, you are required to inform the Department of Homeland Security of your new address. You must file a Form AR-11, Aliens Change of Address Card, within 10 days of your move. There is no fee to file this form, and you may even change your address online via an electronic AR-11 form. The online change of address also accepts address changes for most pending cases. Let's look at some situations under which you lose your green card status. There are many situations through which you can lose your green card status. We have addressed a couple of these above: remaining outside the U.S. for extended periods of time, and filing your tax returns as a non-immigrant. But we want to address another important category now: criminal behavior. Let's look at that criminal behavior. The U.S. is a law-abiding society. Permanent residents in the U.S. must obey all laws. If you're a green card holder and you engage in criminal activity or are convicted of a crime either in the U.S. or elsewhere, you could have serious problems. You can be removed, that is deported from the country, not allowed back into the U.S. if you leave the country, and in certain circumstances, lose your eligibility to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. Let's look at some examples of crimes that may affect or will affect your green card status. These include any crime defined as an aggravated felony, which includes crimes of violence that are felonies with a 1-year prison term, murder, terrorist activities, rape, sexual assault of a child, illegal trafficking in drugs, firearms, or people, a crime of moral turpitude, which in general is a crime with an intent to steal or defraud, a crime where physical harm is done or threatened, a crime where serious physical harm is caused by reckless behavior, or a crime of sexual misconduct. There are also serious consequences for you as a permanent resident if you, 1, lie to get immigration benefits for yourself or someone else, claim you are a U.S. citizen if you're not, vote in a federal or local election open only to U.S. citizens. If you are a habitual drunkard, defined by the immigration authorities as someone who is drunk or someone who uses illegal drugs most of the time. If you are a bigamist, a person married to more than one person at the same time. If you fail to support your family or to pay child or spousal support as ordered by a court. Or if you are arrested for assaulting or harassing a family member, including violating a protection order. This is what we call domestic violence. If you lie to get public benefits, fail to file your tax returns when required, willfully fail to register for the Selective Service. Remember, we talked about that before. You have to register if you're a male between the ages of 18 and 26. If you help someone else who is not a U.S. citizen or national enter the United States illegally, even if that person is a close relative, and even if you are not paid. If you have committed any crime or have been convicted of a crime, you should consult with a reputable immigration attorney or a community-based organization that provides legal services to immigrants before you apply for another immigration benefit or travel outside the U.S. Why is it important to maintain your lawful green card status? Permanent residence is the beginning step or the beginning of the path to U.S. citizenship. A lawful permanent resident, that's the LPR or green card holder, can apply for U.S. citizenship through naturalization after they have been a permanent resident for 5 years. This period is shortened to 3 years if the permanent resident is married to a U.S. citizen and received their green card status through that U.S. citizen spouse, or 4 years if permanent residency was received through political asylum or refugee status. LPRs may submit their applications for naturalization up to 90 days before meeting the residency requirement. U.S. citizens are entitled to several rights and some obligations that do not accrue to permanent residents who are still classified as aliens in this respect. For example, LPRs generally do not have the right to vote, nor the right to be elected in federal and state elections. They do not have the ability to bring most family members to the United States. Remember, permanent residents are only allowed to bring their spouses and unmarried children under 21 years old to to the U.S. They are not eligible for certain federal government jobs, and male residents, permanent residents between the ages of 18 and 26 must still register for the Selective Service. However, like U.S. citizens, permanent residents pay taxes on their worldwide income. Finally, certain conditions, i.e. criminal convictions, that may put a permanent resident in deportation proceedings do not apply to U.S. citizens. Now let's go back and see what may happen to Bruce. Let's recap the facts. Bruce has been living outside the U.S. with his British wife. He is working for a British company, has no true residence in the U.S., and only comes back to the U.S. every couple of years. However, he does have a re-entry permit, and he has continued to pay his U.S. taxes. Bruce is likely to have problems when he enters the U.S. It looks very much like he abandoned his permanent resident status by staying in England after completing his university degree, working for a British company, and probably most telling, living with his British national wife. The re-entry permit and filing of taxes in the U.S. may not be enough to overcome the suspicions of an immigration inspector. He will have to be prepared for some very tough questions. Permanent residents have most of the rights of U.S. citizens, but there are many important reasons to consider becoming a U.S. citizen, including getting those rights only available to U.S. citizens. Green card status is a privilege and not a right. A privilege the U.S. government can take away certain conditions. Maintaining green card status is therefore important so that you can enjoy the privilege of becoming a U.S. citizen. Before a permanent resident, that green card holder, can apply for U.S. citizenship through the naturalization process, he or she needs to fulfill the 5-year, shorter married to a U.S. citizen or an asylee, residency requirement. Permanent residents who spend lengthy periods of time outside the U.S. may disrupt their residency, delaying their ability to naturalize. However, certain permanent residents may qualify for special benefits that allow them to count time spent outside the U.S. toward their residency requirement. These permanent residents will need to submit an application to preserve residence for naturalization purposes. This we'll discuss in a future article. If you have questions about how to maintain green card status, consult a Visa Pro immigration attorney. We'll be happy to guide you through the process.